The gunshot was deafening. Do-yool hit the floor, blood spreading across his shoulder, ears ringing, vision blurring. Above him, the woman with the gun, elegant, cold, hired to destroy his family, was screaming something he couldn't hear. This was it. This was how he died. Protecting the man who'd replaced him. But here's the thing nobody saw coming. This whole nightmare started because Do-yool left his wife when their son was dying. Left her because she was too poor to afford the medical bills. Begged her to ask her family for money. She refused. So he walked out. Married his rich ex-girlfriend. Thought he'd upgraded his life. 3 years later he found out the truth. His wife was the family. The $12 billion heiress he'd been begging to ask for help. She'd been testing him the entire marriage. And he'd failed. Spectacularly. She disappeared. Took his son. Gave him to another man. A powerful, dangerous man who actually deserved them. Then she systematically destroyed Do-yool's entire life. His business. His reputation. Everything. Now, lying on the floor with a bullet in his shoulder, Do-yool realized this was his only shot at redemption. Taking a bullet meant for the man who'd become the father he never was. If you think you know how this ends, you're wrong. Make sure you're subscribed because this story has more twists than you can imagine, and the ending? You definitely won't see it coming. The file folder landed on Do-yool's desk with a quiet thud, and everything he thought he knew about his life unraveled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. You're telling me? He started, his voice trailing off as he stared at the private investigator sitting across from him. You're telling me that Judith, my Judith who I left because she couldn't even afford proper medical care for our son, is the daughter of the Nkami group. The investigator, a thin man with graying temples, nodded slowly. Not just the daughter, Mr. Choi. The daughter. The only heir. Her father's been keeping her identity private for security reasons, but after your divorce was finalized last month, the board insisted she take her rightful place. She's worth approximately $12 billion, maybe more. Do-yool felt his stomach turn over. 3 years. 3 years he'd spent complaining about money, about how Judith never contributed enough, about how she was holding him back from the lifestyle he deserved. He'd gone back to his first love, Soo-jin, the woman who wore designer clothes and drove cars that turned heads, and he'd convinced himself he'd made the right choice. There has to be some mistake, he managed, but his hands were already flipping through the documents. Bank statements. Property deeds. Corporate filings. All bearing Judith's name, dated years before they'd even met. No mistake, the investigator said, standing up. She had access to all of this the entire time you were married. She just chose not to use it. When the man left, Do-yool sat alone in his office, the Seoul skyline glittering beyond his window, and for the first time in months he thought about his son, Maxwell. 5 years old and fighting sickle cell disease, and Do-yool had walked away because he was tired of hospital visits and medical bills and a wife who wouldn't beg her family for help. Except she'd never needed to beg. His phone buzzed. Soo-jin's name flashed across the screen, probably wondering where he was, probably wanting to know if he'd booked that restaurant she liked, and suddenly the sight of her name made him feel sick. He'd left his family. For this. The next morning, Do-yool drove to the house he'd once shared with Judith, a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood that had always embarrassed him when his colleagues asked where he lived. He'd wanted her to ask her family for money, begged her to, but she'd always just smiled that serene smile and said they were fine, that they had everything they needed. The apartment was empty. Furniture gone, walls bare, even the curtains stripped away. They moved out 2 weeks ago. A neighbor called from her doorway, an elderly woman who'd always liked Judith. Said she was going home. Didn't say where, but there were some very fancy cars that came to pick them up. Very fancy indeed. Do-yool's chest tightened. My son. Maxwell, is he? Healthy as can be. Last I saw him. Running around laughing. Whatever treatment he's getting now, it's working wonders. The woman's expression cooled. More than you ever did for them. She shut her door before he could respond. For the next 2 weeks, Do-yool tried everything. Called Judith's old number, disconnected. Searched for her on social media, all accounts deleted. Even tried to contact her through mutual friends, but nobody would tell him anything. It was like she'd vanished. Then Soo-jin's spending got worse. It's just a handbag, she said when he questioned the charge on his credit card. Don't be so cheap, Do. You're supposed to be taking care of me, remember? That's what you promised when you left your boring little wife. Something in her voice, that entitled whine he'd once found charming, now made him want to throw something. But he stayed quiet, smiled, pretended everything was fine even as his savings dwindled and his investments started failing, and somehow, every business deal he'd been counting on fell through at the last minute. 3 months after the divorce, his company went under. I don't understand, he told his accountant, a stack of red-line documents spread between them. These contracts were solid. The investors were committed. What happened? The accountant, a woman who'd worked with him for 6 years, gave him a look that was almost pitying. Someone bought out your investors. Someone with very deep pockets and apparently a personal interest in seeing you fail. I did some digging and, well, all roads lead back to Nkami Group. Judith. His quiet, gentle Judith, who'd never raised her voice, who'd nursed their son through countless hospital stays, who'd worked as a teacher at a small school and came home every evening with paint on her fingers and stories about her students. She was destroying him. Can't you do something? Sujin demanded when he told her he couldn't afford the penthouse apartment anymore, that they'd have to move somewhere smaller. You're pathetic, doll. I left my comfortable life for you, and this is what I get. You left your comfortable life? The words came out sharper than he intended. You mean the life where you were living with your parents because you couldn't hold down a job? She slapped him. Actually slapped him, her palm connecting with his cheek hard enough to sting, and then she grabbed her bags and left, screaming something about how he'd never deserved her anyway. Do-yool stood in the empty apartment, smaller and shabbier than the one he'd shared with Judith, and finally understood what he'd lost. 6 months after the divorce, Do-yool saw Judith again. It wasn't planned. He was at a charity gala, one of the last events he could still get into on his declining reputation, trying to network, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. And there she was. She wore a deep blue dress that moved like water, her hair pulled back in an elegant style he'd never seen before, and on her arm was a man who made every other person in the room look small. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made people step aside without thinking. Do-yool asked someone nearby who he was. That's Taylor Adewale, the woman whispered, her eyes wide. Well, people say he's connected to some very powerful circles in West Africa. Not someone you want to cross, if you know what I mean. But he's been nothing but generous to charities here in Seoul. Opened 3 children's hospitals in the last year alone. Taylor. The way his hand rested on the small of Judith's back, protective but not possessive. The way she smiled up at him, that smile, the one Do-yool had taken for granted for years. He watched as they moved through the crowd, watched as Judith laughed at something Taylor said, watched as his son, their son, came running up to them in a tiny suit, completely healthy, completely happy, and jumped into Taylor's arms like it was the most natural thing in the world. Toby, can we go see the ice sculptures? Please. Of course, little man, Taylor said, his accent a warm blend that matched Judith's. But first, let's make sure your mother gets something to eat. You know how she forgets when she's busy talking. Judith laughed, swatting at his arm. I do not forget. You absolutely do, Taylor countered, but there was such fondness in his voice that Do-yool felt it like a punch to the gut. This was what love looked like. Real love. The kind that noticed small things and cared about them. He'd never loved Judith like that. He'd loved the idea of her, loved having a pretty wife who didn't ask too many questions, but he'd never actually seen her. Before he could stop himself, Do-yool crossed the room. Judith. She turned and her smile disappeared. Not into anger or sadness, just nothing. Like looking at a stranger. Do-yool. I need to talk to you, he said, ignoring Taylor's sharp gaze. Please, just 5 minutes. No, she said simply. It's about Maxwell. I'm his father, I have rights. You signed away your parental rights 6 months ago, Judith interrupted, her voice calm and even. You wanted nothing to do with him because he was, and I quote, too expensive and too much work. Those rights went to Toby 3 months ago. Legally, you're nothing to my son. Our son, Do-yool corrected desperately. My son, Judith repeated. And even if that weren't true, even if you'd fought for him, you don't get to walk back into our lives just because you found out about my money. Did you really think I didn't know why you're here? Why you've been trying to contact me? Taylor shifted slightly and Do-yool suddenly became very aware of how big the man was. Is there a problem here, my love? No problem, Judith said, still looking at Do-yool with those calm, empty eyes. He was just leaving. I made a mistake, Do-yool blurted out. I was stupid and selfish and I didn't see what I had, but I can change. We can try again. For Maxwell's sake, for your bank account's sake, Judith finished. No, Do-yool. Some mistakes don't get fixed. Some bridges burn and you were the one holding the match. She turned away, Taylor's hand gentle on her back as he guided her toward the ice sculptures where Maxwell was bouncing excitedly. Do-yool stood frozen watching his former family walk away, and understood that he'd already lost them. Not 6 months ago when the divorce was finalized. Years ago when he'd first started complaining about money. When he'd rolled his eyes at Judith's stories about her students. When he'd missed Maxwell's hospital appointments because he had drinks with clients. He'd lost them the moment he'd stopped seeing them as people and started seeing them as burdens. The gala became torture after that. Everywhere Do-yool looked, there they were. Judith laughing with business associates, Taylor lifting Maxwell onto his shoulders so the boy could see better. The three of them looking like a family in a way Do-yool's family had never looked. Quite the woman, isn't she? Do-yool turned to find an older gentleman beside him, distinguished and clearly wealthy from the way people kept nodding respectfully in his direction. I'm sorry. Judith Nkami, the man said. My daughter. I'm Ibuka Nkami. And you're Do-yool Choi, the man who divorced her because she wasn't rich enough. Do-yool's blood ran cold. Sir, save it, Ibuka said, but his voice wasn't angry, just tired. I wanted to meet the man who was so blind he couldn't see gold when it was right in front of him. My daughter begged me not to interfere in your marriage. Said she wanted to know you loved her for herself, not for what she could give you. And you proved every fear she had right. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Ibuka corrected. She tried to tell you about her family once, early in your marriage. You told her you didn't care about her past, only your future together. He thought that was romantic. Took me a while to convince her you just weren't interested in anything that didn't directly benefit you. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. That's not fair. Isn't it? Ibuka sipped his drink, watching his daughter across the room. You left her when your son was sick. When she needed support more than ever. You went back to your ex-girlfriend and complained about hospital bills while my grandson was fighting for his life. And now that you know Judith could have paid those bills without blinking, now that you know she let you struggle because she wanted to see who you really were, you want her back. I love her, Do-yool said, but even to his own ears it sounded hollow. You love her money, Ibuka said. If you'd loved her you would have stayed. He walked away, leaving Do-yool alone in a room full of people, and for the first time in his life, Do-yool understood what true loneliness felt like. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of knowing you'd destroyed the only thing that mattered. Over the next few months, Do-yool's life continued its downward spiral. Soo-jin had maxed out his credit cards before leaving. His apartment lease was up and he couldn't afford to renew. He ended up in a tiny studio on the outskirts of Seoul, the kind of place he'd once looked down on, and worked 3 part-time jobs just to make rent. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the knowing. Knowing that Maxwell was thriving in ways he never had before. Do-yool saw photos sometimes when he searched Judith's name online. Articles about her charitable work, about the hospitals she was funding, about her relationship with Taylor Adewale, the mysterious businessman who seemed to worship the ground she walked on. There was one photo that stayed with Do-yool, haunted him during his long shifts and sleepless nights. Maxwell on a beach somewhere tropical, building sandcastles with Taylor while Judith watched from under an umbrella, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. She was pregnant. Moving on. Building a new family with a man who clearly treasured her. And Do-yool was alone. You look terrible, his mother said when he finally broke down and visited her. This is what you get for leaving that sweet girl. I told you Judith was special. I told you not to be like your father, always chasing what looked shinier. I know, Do-yool whispered. I know, Mom. So what are you going to do about it? What can I do? She's with someone else. She's happy. She doesn't want anything to do with me. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Then maybe it's time you stopped thinking about what you want and started thinking about what's right. That boy Maxwell, he's still your blood. Even if you can't be his father anymore, you can make sure he knows you're sorry. You can make sure he grows up without the poison of your resentment. How? Do-yool asked, genuine confusion in his voice. You let them go, his mother said simply. Truly let them go. Stop trying to get her back, stop trying to fix what you broke. Just let them be happy. It should have been easy advice to follow. But every time Do-yool tried to move forward, he found himself stuck, thinking about Judith's smile, about Maxwell's laugh, about the family he'd thrown away. Then came the accident. Do-yool was walking home from his evening job at a convenience store when he saw the car swerve. Saw it jump the curb. Saw the child, a little girl no older than Maxwell, frozen in its path. He didn't think. Just moved. The impact threw him 6 feet and he felt something in his leg crack. But the girl was safe, crying in her mother's arms, and that was what mattered. Paramedics came. Police. Someone took photos. By the next morning, Do-yool was in the hospital with a broken leg and a minor concussion, and his face was all over the news. Local man saves child in heroic act, the headlines read. He didn't feel heroic. He felt tired. The hospital room was small and plain, nothing like the private suites Maxwell had stayed in during his treatments, and Do-yool was alone with his thoughts when the door opened. Judith stood in the doorway. She looked different than she had at the gala. Softer maybe. Her belly was more pronounced now, probably 6 months along, and she wore simple clothes, jeans and a loose shirt. No makeup. No jewelry. Just Judith. I saw the news, she said quietly, stepping inside. Are you all right? I'm fine, Do-yool managed. Why are you here? Because despite everything, I don't like seeing people hurt. She sat in the chair beside his bed, careful with her movements. And because Maxwell saw the news too. He wanted me to check on you. Do-yool's eyes burned. He did. He's 5, Judith said gently. He doesn't really understand what happened between us. He just knows you used to be around and now you're not. When he saw you get hurt saving that girl, he got scared. Can I see him? The words came out broken. No, Judith said, but not unkindly. Toby's with him now, explaining things. It's better this way too. Better for everyone. I'm sorry, Do-yool whispered. I know it doesn't matter, I know I can't fix what I did, but I'm so sorry. Judith was quiet for a long time. I know you are. But being sorry doesn't change anything. You made your choices and now we're all living with them. Are you happy? He asked. With him. With Taylor. A smile crossed Judith's face, small but genuine. Incredibly happy. He sees me too. Really sees me. Not the money, not what I can do for him, just me. He makes me laugh. He's patient with Maxwell. He rubs my feet when they're sore and doesn't complain when I cry over silly things because of the pregnancy hormones. He's everything I thought I had with you, but real this time. Each word was a knife, but Do-yool deserved every cut. I'm glad. I'm glad you found someone who treats you right. Are you? Judith studied him. Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? Both probably, Do-yool admitted. I'm selfish enough to hate that it's not me. But I'm also grown enough now to know that what I want doesn't matter anymore. You deserve to be happy. Maxwell deserves to be healthy and loved. If Taylor gives you that, then I'm glad. Judith stood up, smoothing her shirt over her belly. The girl you saved, her family wants to thank you. They're trying to raise money to help with your medical bills. I told them I'd take care of it. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she interrupted. But that little girl is alive because you didn't hesitate. Because you put someone else first, maybe for the first time in a long time. That deserves to be acknowledged. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. Do-yool, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope you learn to be happy with yourself, to see value in things that aren't just shiny and impressive. Because until you do, you're going to keep losing the things that matter. Then she was gone and Do-yool was alone again. The hospital released him 2 days later with a cast on his leg and instructions to rest. His landlord had evicted him for missing rent, so Do-yool ended up on his mother's couch, 34 years old and starting from nothing. This is good, his mother said, bringing him tea. Rock bottom is the best place to build from. No more pretending. No more chasing. Just you figuring out who you actually are. He was right, Do-yool realized. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he had no choice but to be honest with himself. He'd married Judith because she was beautiful and kind and didn't ask difficult questions. He'd loved her in the shallow way you love things that make you look good. And when she'd stopped making him look good, when she'd become a mother with responsibilities and fears and needs, he'd abandoned her. The shame of it was crushing. But maybe shame was what he needed. Do-yool spent his recovery learning to be still. learning to sit with his mistakes instead of running from them. He got a job doing data entry from home, nothing glamorous, barely enough to contribute to his mother's household expenses. But it was honest work. He stopped looking up Judith online. Stopped torturing himself with photos of her happy family. Started going to therapy, cheap community sessions that made him confront the ugliness inside himself. "You're not a bad person," his therapist said during one session. "But you've done bad things. You've hurt people. The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" "I don't know," Do-yool admitted. "How do you make up for something like that?" "You probably can't," the therapist said bluntly. "Some things can't be fixed. But you can make sure you don't repeat the pattern. You can become someone who wouldn't make those choices again." It was hard work, harder than anything Do-yool had done before. Facing himself. Accepting that he'd been the problem. Understanding that wanting to change wasn't the same as actually changing. Months passed. His leg healed. He took on more work hours, saved money, moved into his own small apartment. Started volunteering at a children's hospital, reading stories to sick kids, and tried not to think about how Maxwell had once loved when he read to him. One evening, almost a year after the gala, Do-yool was leaving the hospital when he saw Taylor in the lobby. The man was alone, holding a coffee cup and staring at his phone with a worried expression that seemed out of place on his usually calm face. Before Do-yool could decide whether to approach or slip away unnoticed, Taylor looked up. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered. "Choi Do-yool," Taylor said, his voice neutral. "Adewale Taylor," Do-yool replied, trying to match the tone. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Taylor gestured to the chairs nearby. "Do you have a minute?" Do-yool nodded, following him to the seating area. They sat, and for a long moment neither spoke. "I've wanted to talk to you," Taylor finally said. "About Maxwell." Do-yool's heart rate picked up. "Is he all right?" "He's fine. Thriving, actually. The new treatments are working better than we hoped." Taylor set his coffee down. "But he asks about you sometimes. Wants to know why you don't visit anymore." The words hurt more than Do-yool expected. "What do you tell him?" "The truth in ways a 5-year-old can understand. That sometimes adults make choices that hurt people. That you and his mother decided it was better to live separately. That I love him and his mother very much and I'm honored to be part of their lives." Taylor met Do-yool's eyes. "But I never say you don't love him. Because I think despite everything you do." "I do," Do-yool whispered. "I love him so much. I just didn't know how to show it. Didn't prioritize it. And now he has a family that puts him first," Taylor finished gently. "Judith told me what you did saving that child. She said it reminded her of the man she thought you were when she first met you." "I was never that man," Do-yool said bitterly. "I pretended to be. Played the role. But the second it got difficult, I ran." "People can change," Taylor said. "If they want to badly enough. If they're willing to do the work." "Have you ever failed someone you loved?" Do-yool asked suddenly. "Have you ever been the reason someone's life fell apart?" Taylor was quiet for a long time. "Yes. In my younger years I made choices that hurt people. People who trusted me. I thought power was more important than loyalty, thought strength meant never admitting weakness." He looked down at his hands. "It took losing everything to understand what actually mattered. By the time I figured it out, most of the people I'd hurt were gone. Moved on. Built lives without me." "How did you move forward?" "I stopped trying to fix the past," Taylor said simply. "Started focusing on not making the same mistakes again. When I met Judith, I promised myself I would be different. That I would choose her and Maxwell every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." "You're good for them," Do-yool said, and meant it. "Better than I ever was." "Maybe," Taylor acknowledged. "But that doesn't mean your son doesn't deserve to know you tried. That you're working to be better." Do-yool frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Judith and I talked about this. About whether we should keep Maxwell completely separate from you or whether we should allow some kind of supervised contact. Right now, legally, I'm his father. But blood matters too, and one day he's going to have questions. Better he has answers from you than builds a fantasy in his head." Hope fluttered in Do-yool's chest, dangerous and painful. "You'd let me see him?" "Supervised visits. Monthly maybe. At our home with Judith and me present. No promises about the future, no rights beyond what we grant you. And the second you slip back into old patterns, the second you hurt him or Judith, it stops. Permanently. Taylor's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Do you understand? Yes, Do-yool said immediately. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Taylor said. Prove you deserve it first. The first visit was scheduled for 2 weeks later on a Saturday afternoon. Do-yool arrived early, standing outside the gate of a beautiful house in one of Seoul's nicest neighborhoods, sweating despite the cool weather. Judith answered the door, her belly enormous now, probably 8 months along. She looked tired but happy, and the sight of her still made something in Do-yool's chest ache. Come in, she said simply. He's nervous. We told him you were coming and he's been asking questions all morning. The house was warm and lived in, toys scattered across the floor, children's drawings on the refrigerator, photos on every surface. A life. Real full life. Maxwell appeared from around a corner, smaller than Do-yool remembered but healthy, his eyes bright and curious. Hi, he said shyly. Hi, Maxwell, Do-yool managed, kneeling down to the boy's level. You've gotten so big. Toby says I'm growing like a weed, Maxwell said proudly. He says weeds are strong and can grow anywhere. Do-yool smiled through the pain. He's right. You're very strong. They spent an hour together, playing with blocks on the living room floor while Judith and Taylor stayed nearby, not hovering but present. Maxwell talked about school, about his new baby sister who was coming soon, about the trip to the beach where he'd seen dolphins. Not once did he call Do-yool Dad. And Do-yool didn't ask him to. When it was time to leave, Maxwell hugged him briefly, the kind of polite hug you give a friendly stranger, and said, Will you come back? If your mom and Toby say I can, Do-yool answered honestly. I hope you can, Maxwell said. You're nice. It was such a simple compliment, such a low bar, but it made Do-yool's eyes burn. Outside, Taylor walked him to his car. He did well. So did you. He doesn't remember me as his father, Do-yool said quietly. Would you want him to remember you the way you were back then? Taylor asked. Better, he knows you as someone trying to do better. It was a fair point. The visits continued. Monthly at first, then twice monthly as Maxwell grew more comfortable. Do-yool brought books, remembered which ones Maxwell liked, started learning about his interests instead of just showing up. He was there in the waiting room when Judith gave birth to a daughter. Amina, they named her, and she had her mother's eyes and her father's nose, and Do-yool felt no jealousy, only happiness for them. Congratulations, he told Taylor in the hospital corridor. She's beautiful. She is, Taylor agreed, exhausted but glowing. Thank you for being here. Judith wanted you to know. She appreciates what you're doing. The effort you're making with Maxwell. It's the least I can do, Do-yool said. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall. Do-yool's life found a rhythm. Work, therapy, visits with Maxwell, volunteering at the hospital. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the life he'd once imagined for himself. But it was honest. Soo-jin reappeared on a random Tuesday, showing up at Do-yool's apartment with mascara running down her face and desperation in her eyes. I need help, she said. Please, Do, I have nowhere else to go. He almost closed the door on her. Almost. But old habits died hard, and he let her in, made her tea, listened to her sob story about how the rich man she'd left him for had kicked her out, how she had no money, no job, no options. I made a mistake, she said, reaching for his hand. We both did. But we can fix this, can't we? We were good together once. Do-yool looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what Judith must have seen when she looked at him. Someone who loved the idea of things but not the reality. Someone who would leave the moment things got difficult. No, he said gently. We can't fix this because there was never anything real to fix. We were two people using each other, and I'm done with that. You're choosing her? Soo-jin demanded, anger replacing her tears. She doesn't want you anymore. She's moved on with someone better. You'll never get her back. I know, Do-yool said. And I'm not trying to. I'm trying to be someone my son doesn't have to be ashamed of. Someone I don't have to be ashamed of. And that person doesn't take back someone who only wants me because she's run out of options. Soo-jin left, screaming about how he'd regret this, how he was nothing without her. Do-yool closed the door and felt only relief. The next visit with Maxwell, the boy surprised him by asking, Are you sad? Sometimes, Do-yool admitted. They were drawing together, coloring books spread across the table. But less than I used to be. Mama says being sad is okay as long as you don't stay there forever. Maxwell said wisely. She says feelings are like weather. They change. Your mama is very smart, Do-yool said. I know, Maxwell replied matter-of-factly. Toby is too. He says one day I can run a whole company if I want, or I can be an artist, or I can do nothing at all and just be happy. He says there's no wrong choice as long as I'm kind. Do-yool's throat tightened. This was the childhood he should have given his son. These were the lessons he should have taught. But at least Maxwell was learning them from someone. 2 years after the divorce, Do-yool attended Maxwell's 7th birthday party. It was a small celebration, just family and a few school friends, held in Judith and Taylor's backyard. Paper lanterns hung from trees, music played softly and children ran around laughing. Do-yool brought a gift, a book about a boy who learned to be brave, and watched from the edge of things as Maxwell opened presents with Amina bouncing on Taylor's knee. You can come closer, Judith said, appearing beside him with baby number 3, a son they'd named Kalechi, sleeping against her shoulder. You're part of this too in your own way. Am I? Do-yool asked. You're trying to be, she said. That counts for something. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their son blow out candles and make a wish. Do-yool didn't know what Maxwell wished for, but he hoped it came true. I never thanked you, Do-yool said quietly, for giving me this chance, for letting me know him. Thank Toby, Judith said. He's the one who convinced me. Said everyone deserves a chance to be better if they're willing to do the work. He's a good man, Do-yool said. You chose well. I did, Judith agreed. This time I chose someone who chooses me back. Every day. There was no bitterness in her voice, just fact. Do-yool nodded, accepting the truth of it. As the party wound down and guests began leaving, Maxwell ran up to Do-yool with chocolate on his face and joy in his eyes. Did you see my cake? It had superheroes. I saw, Do-yool said, crouching down. It was amazing. Next year Toby says we can have it at the beach, Maxwell said excitedly. Will you come to that one too? If I'm invited, Do-yool said carefully. Maxwell considered this seriously, then nodded. I'll invite you. You always come when you say you will. Mama says that's important. Such a simple thing. Showing up. Keeping promises. But it was everything. Do-yool drove home that evening feeling lighter than he had in years. His apartment was still small. His job was still unglamorous. His life looked nothing like what he'd once imagined. But he had his son's trust, hard-earned and fragile as it was. He had his own respect, equally hard-earned. And he had the knowledge that he was different than he'd been, better than he'd been, still working to be better still. The story could have ended with him getting Judith back, with some grand gesture that made her realize he'd changed. But that wasn't how real life worked. Some mistakes were permanent. Some people moved on and built beautiful lives without you. And sometimes the best you could do was be happy for them, work on yourself and hope that one day when your son looked back he saw someone who tried to make things right. Do-yool wasn't the hero of this story. Judith was building a life on her own terms with a man who valued her properly. Taylor was opening his heart and home to a child who wasn't his by blood but was his in every way that mattered. Do-yool was just the cautionary tale. The man who learned too late what truly mattered. But maybe that was enough. Maybe being the lesson others learned from was its own kind of redemption. He'd never get Judith back. He'd never be Maxwell's real father again. But he could be present. He could be honest. He could be someone his son didn't have to make excuses for. And in the quiet of his small apartment, Do-yool decided that was enough. Until the letter arrived. It came on a Wednesday morning, slipped under his door while he was making coffee. Heavy paper, expensive. The kind that screamed money and power. Do-yool picked it up with shaking hands, already knowing it was trouble. Inside 3 words: we need to talk. There was no signature or return address. Just a phone number written in elegant script. Do-yool stared at it for a full minute before his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Do-yool Choi. The voice was female, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. My name is Yoon Mi-rae, and I represent certain interests that have been watching you very carefully. I don't know what you're talking about, Do-yool said, already moving to hang up. Your ex-wife is worth $12 billion, Mi-rae continued as if he hadn't spoken. Your son stands to inherit half of that along with his siblings. And you, the biological father, have been completely cut out. Don't you find that unfair? Do-yool's stomach turned. I signed away my rights. It was my choice. Was it though? Or were you pressured by a woman who hid her wealth from you throughout your entire marriage? Who let you struggle and suffer while she sat on billions? Mireille's voice was poison honey. I'm offering you a chance to rectify that. To claim what's rightfully yours. Nothing is rightfully mine, Do-yool said firmly. I made my choices. I'm living with them. How noble, Mireille said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. We'll see how long that lasts. I'll be in touch. She hung up before he could respond. Do-yool should have told someone. Should have called Judith or Taylor or even the police. But he convinced himself it was nothing, just some scammer who'd read about his story in the news and thought they could manipulate him. He was wrong. The second contact came during his visit with Maxwell the following week. Do-yool arrived at the house to find Judith looking pale and Taylor on the phone, speaking in rapid Yoruba with an edge to his voice that Do-yool had never heard before. What's wrong? Do-yool asked. Judith bit her lip. Someone's been asking questions about our family. About Maxwell specifically. Security caught a woman trying to photograph the children at school yesterday. What kind of woman? Elegant. Well-dressed. She claimed to be a journalist doing a piece on blended families, but when security pressed her, she ran. Judith wrapped her arms around herself. Toby's people are looking into it, but you're scared, Do-yool finished. Wouldn't you be? Judith snapped, then immediately softened. Sorry. We've worked so hard to keep the children out of the spotlight. To give them normal lives despite the money. And now someone's watching them. Do-yool's blood ran cold as he remembered the phone call. I think I might know who it is. He told them everything. The letter, the phone call, Mireille's offer. With every word, Taylor's expression grew darker. Yoon Mireille, Taylor said when Do-yool finished. I know that name. She's a fixer. Works for wealthy families who want to acquire assets through unconventional means. What kind of assets? Do-yool asked, though he already knew the answer. Children, Judith whispered. She brokers illegal adoptions. Arranges kidnappings for ransom. She's been on our security watch list for months, but we never thought. Her voice broke. We never thought she'd target us. Why would she contact me though? Do-yool asked. Because you're the weak link, Taylor said bluntly. The biological father who was pushed out. She probably thought she could manipulate you, use your resentment to gain access to the children. I would never. I know, Taylor interrupted. But she doesn't. She sees a man who lost everything and assumes he can be bought. The visit with Maxwell was cancelled. Security was doubled. And Do-yool went home feeling like the world was crumbling again, except this time it wasn't his fault. Mireille called again that night. Did you tell them? She asked without preamble. About our conversation? Stay away from my son, Do-yool said through gritted teeth. Your son. Mireille laughed. He's not your son anymore, remember? You signed those papers. But he could be again with the right legal pressure. Imagine, Do-yool. You could be part of his life properly. Have real custody. Make decisions about his future. By doing what? Helping you kidnap him. Such ugly words, Mireille said. I'm talking about legitimate legal action. You were coerced into signing away your rights while under financial duress. Any good lawyer could argue that case. And I know excellent lawyers. Why do you even care? Do-yool demanded. What's in this for you? Mireille was quiet for a moment. Let's just say I have clients who are very interested in the Nkami family. Who believe that Judith's father acquired his wealth through less than honorable means and that his grandchildren should be redistributed to more deserving families. That's insane. That's business, Mireille corrected. And you're either with me or against me. Choose carefully, Do-yool. I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen to that quaint little apartment you're living in. She hung up again and this time Do-yool immediately called Taylor. She's escalating, Taylor said grimly after hearing the new threat. Moving from manipulation to intimidation. That means she's on a timeline. What do? We set a trap, Taylor said. And you're going to be the bait. The plan was simple in theory, terrifying in practice. Do-yool would pretend to be interested in Mireille's offer, would meet with her and wear a wire, get her to confess her real intentions on tape. This is dangerous, Judith said the night before the meeting, her hands twisting together. If she figures out what you're doing. I'll be careful, Do-yool promised. I owe you this. I owe Maxwell this. You don't owe us anything, Judith said quietly. You could walk away right now and no one would blame you. I would blame me, Do-yool said. I've spent 2 years trying to be better. This is what better looks like. The meeting was set for a cafe in Gangnam, public enough to be safe but private enough for conversation. Do-yool arrived early, the wire itching under his shirt, and waited. Miri swept in exactly on time, and Do-yool's first thought was that she looked normal. Pretty, well-dressed, the kind of woman you'd see at any upscale establishment and never think twice about. That made her more dangerous, not less. Do-yool, she said warmly, sitting across from him. I'm so glad you decided to meet. Can I order you something? The coffee here is excellent. I'm fine, Do-yool said. Let's just talk about what you want. Direct. I appreciate that. Miri folded her hands on the table. I want to help you regain your parental rights. In exchange, I need access to the Nkami family home. Access for what? Does it matter? Miri tilted her head. You get your son back. That's all you should care about. It matters to me, Do-yool said carefully, remembering Taylor's coaching. I'm not doing anything that could hurt Maxwell. Noble, Miri said, but there was an edge to it now. But ultimately pointless. With or without you, I'm getting what I need. You're just an opportunity for convenience. And what exactly do you need? Do-yool pressed. Miri studied him for a long moment and Do-yool felt sweat trickle down his back. Then she smiled. There's a small matter of a land deed. Judith's father acquired property in Cameroon 40 years ago. Property that rightfully belongs to my client's family. Unfortunately, the deed is kept in a safe in their home, and the Nkami family has been uncooperative about returning it. So you're a thief, Do-yool said flatly. I'm a retrieval specialist, Miri corrected. And you're wasting my time. Either you help me or you don't, but decide now because my patience is running thin. What happens if I say no? Miri's smile turned cold. Then I move forward with my backup plan. The one that involves those precious children having a very unfortunate accident. Nothing fatal probably. Just scary enough that Judith and her husband become more reasonable about negotiating. Do-yool's hands clenched under the table. You're threatening to hurt children. I'm stating facts, Miri said. The world is dangerous, Do-yool. Accidents happen all the time. Especially to families who don't have proper security. She leaned forward. But they wouldn't need to worry about that if someone just gave me what I want. So really, you'd be protecting them by helping me. That's twisted logic. That's reality. Miri stood up. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, I make my own arrangements. She left and Do-yool sat frozen, the wire recording every word, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his chest. We got it, Taylor said later, listening to the recording in his office with Judith beside him and 2 security personnel taking notes. Clear threats, clear intent. This is enough to bring to the authorities. Will it stop her though? Judith asked, one hand on her belly where Kelechi was surely sleeping. People like her always have contingency plans. Which is why we're not just going to the police, Taylor said. We're going to handle this my way. Do-yool knew he probably shouldn't ask what that meant. Knew that Taylor's connections, the ones that made people whisper and step aside, weren't all legitimate. But right now he didn't care. What do you need from me? Do-yool asked. I need you to make the call, Taylor said. Tell her you're in. That you'll help her get into the house. Are you sure that's safe? Judith interrupted. If she figures out. She won't, Taylor said firmly. Because Do-yool is going to be convincing. And because I'll have people watching every step of the way. The next 24 hours were the longest of Do-yool's life. He made the call, told Miri he was in, arranged to meet her outside the Nkami house on Saturday evening when Judith and Taylor would supposedly be at a charity function. Smart choice, Miri said, satisfaction clear in her voice. I knew you'd see reason eventually. Saturday arrived cold and gray, the kind of weather that matched Do-yool's mood. He dressed carefully, checked the new wire Taylor's people had given him, and tried to calm his racing thoughts. If anything goes wrong, Judith said at the final briefing, her eyes wet, if she threatens you, you run. Do you understand? We can handle this another way. Nothing's going to go wrong, Do-yool said with more confidence than he felt. Miri arrived exactly when she said she would, dressed in black with a bag slung over her shoulder. Show me the entrance, she said without preamble. Do-yool led her to the side door, the one he'd been using for his visits with Maxwell. His hands shook as he entered the code Taylor had given him and the door clicked open. Inside the house was dark and quiet. Too quiet. "Where's the safe?" Mir asked, pulling out a small flashlight. "Upstairs," Do-yool said. "In the study." They climbed the stairs and with every step, Do-yool expected someone to jump out, for Taylor's people to appear and end this. But nothing happened. The study door was unlocked. Inside, exactly where Taylor had said it would be, was a safe built into the wall. "Perfect," Mir breathed, dropping to her knees in front of it. "This will only take a minute." She pulled tools from her bag and Do-yool watched her work, feeling useless and scared and wondering where the backup was, why nobody was stopping this. Then he heard it. A small sound from the hallway. Footstep. Mir heard it too. She spun around, hand diving into her bag, and came up with something that made Do-yool's blood freeze. "A gun." "You set me up," she said coldly, the weapon pointed at his chest. "I should have known. Weak men are always the most dangerous because they're predictable." "Put the gun down," Taylor's voice came from the doorway. He stood there calmly, hands visible, no weapon Do-yool could see. "You're surrounded. There are 4 of my people downstairs, 2 outside, and police on their way." "Then I guess I'll have to make this quick," Mir said and shifted her aim toward Taylor. What happened next happened fast. Do-yool didn't think, just moved, throwing himself between Mir and Taylor just as the gun went off. The sound was deafening in the small room. Pain bloomed in Do-yool's shoulder, bright and terrible, and he fell. Someone screamed. Maybe Judith, who appeared from somewhere, or maybe it was him. The world tilted sideways and Do-yool saw Taylor tackle Mir, saw the gun skitter across the floor, saw security flood into the room. Then everything went black. He woke up in a hospital, which was becoming an unfortunate pattern in his life. His shoulder was bandaged and throbbing, and when he turned his head, he saw Taylor sitting in the chair beside his bed. "You're an idiot," Taylor said, but his voice was gentle. "A brave idiot, but still an idiot." "Did you get her?" Do-yool croaked. "We got her. Police arrested her and she's already started talking, trying to cut a deal. Turns out she was working for a businessman in Cameroon who's been trying to claim the Nkami land for years. Your testimony combined with the wire recording is more than enough to put her away for a long time." "Good," Do-yool said. "That's good. Why did you do it?" Taylor asked. "Jump in front of the gun. You could have died." "You would have done the same for me," Do-yool said simply. "Besides, Maxwell needs you." "He doesn't need me, not really, but he needs you." Taylor was quiet for a long time. "He needs you too. Maybe not as a father, but as someone who shows him that people can change. That mistakes don't have to define you forever." The door opened and Judith came in carrying Amina, with Maxwell trailing behind looking scared. When the boy saw Do-yool awake, his face broke into a relieved smile. "You're okay," Maxwell said, running to the bedside. "Mama said you got hurt protecting Toby." "I'm okay," Do-yool confirmed. "Just a little sore." "That was very brave," Maxwell said seriously. "Heroes get hurt sometimes when they protect people." The word hero made something crack in Do-yool's chest. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man trying to make up for being terrible, trying to earn back a fraction of what he'd thrown away. But if Maxwell saw him that way, maybe it was okay to accept it. "Can I sign your bandage?" Maxwell asked. "When my friend broke his arm, everyone signed his cast." "I'd like that," Do-yool said. Judith handed Maxwell a marker, and the boy carefully wrote his name on the white bandage, his tongue poking out in concentration. When he finished, he looked up with pride. "There. Now everyone will know you're my friend. Not my dad. Just my friend." And somehow that was enough. The weeks after Mir's arrest were strange. Do-yool's shoulder healed slowly, leaving him with a scar and a story he tried not to tell too often. The media picked up on what happened, called him a hero, wanted interviews. He turned them all down. "You could make money from this," his mother pointed out. "Tell your story, write a book maybe." "It's not my story to sell," Do-yool said. "It's Judith's and Maxwell's, and they deserve their privacy." His mother smiled at him, the kind of smile that said she was proud, and Do-yool realized he'd been chasing that approval his whole life without knowing it. Work got easier. His boss, impressed by the news coverage despite Do-yool's attempts to avoid it, offered him a promotion. Nothing huge, but enough to move into a better apartment to start saving money properly. His visits with Maxwell continued, now twice monthly and slowly expanding. Sometimes Judith would leave them alone for short periods, trusting Do-yool in ways she never had before. "You're doing really well," she said one afternoon while Do-yool and Maxwell built an elaborate tower out of blocks. "With him, I mean. You're patient. Present. It's nice to see." "I'm trying," Do-yool said. "That's all I can do." "It's more than trying at this point," Judith said gently. "You saved Toby's life. Saved all of us, really." Mireille admitted during interrogation that if she hadn't gotten the deed, she was planning to kidnap one of the children for ransom. Do-yool's blood ran cold. "I didn't know that. We kept it quiet. Didn't want to scare you." Judith sat down beside him, watching Maxwell add another block to the tower. "But you should know. What you did mattered. Not just the heroics but everything before. If you'd helped her instead of coming to us, if you'd chosen differently—" "I wouldn't have," Do-yool interrupted. "Not anymore. Not after everything I've learned." "I know," Judith said. "That's why I wanted to talk to you about something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Official-looking papers, legal documents, and Do-yool's heart started racing. "Toby and I have been talking," Judith said carefully. "About the future. About what's fair and what's right. And we think Maxwell deserves to know his biological father properly. Not just as a visitor but as someone with actual standing in his life." "What are you saying?" "We're offering you joint custody," Judith said. "Not full, not equal, but real. Legal rights, decision-making input, more time with him. If you want it." Do-yool stared at the papers, unable to process what he was hearing. "Why? After everything?" "Because people change," Judith said simply. "Because you've proven over and over that you're not the man you were. Because Maxwell asks about you, wants to spend more time with you, and we think he deserves to have that relationship if it's healthy." She paused. "And because Toby believes in second chances. He says everyone deserves one if they're willing to do the work, and you've done the work." "I don't know what to say," Do-yool whispered. "Say you'll think about it," Judith suggested. "It's a big responsibility. You'd need to be consistent, committed, present in ways you weren't before. But we think you're ready. And more importantly, we think Maxwell needs you." The tower fell over, blocks scattering everywhere, and Maxwell laughed, already starting to rebuild. Do-yool watched him, this beautiful boy who had his eyes in Judith's smile, and felt something shift in his chest. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes to be worthy of this." "You already are," Judith said. "You already are." The custody arrangement started slowly. One weekend day a month became two, then evolved into occasional weeknight dinners. Do-yool learned to cook Maxwell's favorite foods, learned the names of all his friends from school, learned to navigate the complicated social dynamics of 7-year-old drama. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when Maxwell would compare him to Taylor, would mention how Toby did things differently, better. And Do-yool had to swallow his pride and accept that he would never be Taylor, would never be the primary father figure. But he could be something else. Something valuable in his own way. "You know what I like about you?" Maxwell said one evening while they were reading together. "You always admit when you don't know something. Toby does too, but you're different. You say it like it's okay not to know." "It is okay," Do-yool said. "Nobody knows everything." "Some grown-ups pretend they do though," Maxwell pointed out. "My teacher sometimes. And this one kid's dad, he always acts like he's the smartest person ever." "Well, I'm definitely not the smartest person ever," Do-yool said with a laugh. "I've made a lot of mistakes." "Like leaving me and Mama?" The question was innocent, curious rather than accusatory, but it still hurt. "Yeah. Like that." "Why did you?" Maxwell asked. "Leave, I mean. Was I bad?" "No," Do-yool said immediately, setting the book aside and turning to face his son fully. "You were never bad, Maxwell. You were perfect. I was the problem. I didn't understand what mattered. I thought money and fancy things were more important than family, and I was wrong." "Do you still think that?" "No," Do-yool said honestly. "Now I think family is the most important thing in the world. But I had to lose mine to learn that." Maxwell considered this, his expression serious. "Mama says mistakes are how we learn. But she also says some mistakes hurt people and then you have to work really hard to make it better." "Your mama is right," Do-yool said. "I hurt you and her, and I've been trying to make it better ever since. I know I can't fix everything, but I hope I hope I can be someone you're not ashamed to know. I'm not ashamed, Maxwell said, leaning against Do-yool's side. You saved Toby. That makes you a hero. I'm not a hero, Do-yool protested. You are to me, Maxwell said simply. And really, what else mattered? Meanwhile, something else was changing. Do-yool started noticing things about his life, his apartment, his routine. Started noticing that he was happy. Not ecstatic, not living some perfect dream life, but genuinely content. He had his son in his life. He had work that paid the bills and colleagues who respected him. He had his mother who called every week to check on him. He had therapy sessions where he continued unpacking his mistakes and learning to do better. It was a quiet life. A humble life. Nothing like what he'd once imagined for himself. But it was real. Soo-jin tried to come back one more time, showing up at his door with apologies and promises. I've changed, she said. I've grown. We could try again, do it right this time. No, Do-yool said without hesitation. We couldn't. Because I've changed and the person I am now knows we were never right for each other. I hope you find what you're looking for, Soo-jin. I really do. But you won't find it with me. She left angry and Do-yool felt nothing but relief. The custody arrangement solidified. Official papers were signed, terms were agreed upon, and suddenly Do-yool had legal standing in his son's life again. Not as a primary parent but as someone with rights and responsibilities. How does it feel? Taylor asked during one of their now regular conversations. They developed an unlikely friendship, the two of them, built on mutual respect and shared love for the same child. Terrifying, Do-yool admitted. And wonderful. Mostly terrifying though. Taylor laughed. That's parenthood. The terror never goes away, you just get better at hiding it. You don't seem terrified. I'm an excellent actor, Taylor said with a grin. But trust me, every time one of the kids gets sick or has a nightmare or comes home upset, I panic. I just do it quietly. They were sitting in Taylor's study, the same room where Mira had pulled a gun, though it had been completely redecorated since then. Do-yool still got twitchy being in there. Thank you, Do-yool said suddenly. For giving me this chance. For not shutting me out completely. Thank Judith, Taylor said. She's the one who insisted. Said everyone deserves the opportunity to be better if they're willing to put in the work. She's kinder than I deserve. Maybe, Taylor agreed. But kindness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to see the good in people even when they've shown you their worst. Do-yool thought about that a lot over the following months. About kindness, about forgiveness, about the difference between earning something and being given grace. He threw himself into being the best co-parent he could be. Showed up for Maxwell's school events, learned to coordinate schedules with Judith and Taylor, contributed financially to things his son needed even though the Nkami family could afford anything 100 times over. You don't have to do that, Judith said when he insisted on splitting the cost of Maxwell's new bicycle. I want to, Do-yool said. He's my son too. I should contribute. Okay, Judith said softly. Thank you. Those small acknowledgments meant everything. Time passed. Seasons changed. Maxwell grew taller. Amina started talking in full sentences. Kelechi learned to walk. And through it all, Do-yool showed up. Consistent. Present. He started dating again eventually, nothing serious, but it was nice to have companionship. He met Tandy at the hospital where he still volunteered. A nurse with a warm smile and easy laugh. So you have a kid? She asked on their third date. Yeah, Do-yool said. It's complicated though. I'm not the primary parent, but I'm in his life. Sounds like you're doing your best, Tandy said. That's all any parent can do, right? She didn't run. Didn't judge. Just accepted him as he was, mistakes and growth and all. Felt like maybe, finally, Do-yool was learning what healthy love looked like. And then 2 years after Mira's arrest, Ibuka Nkami died. The funeral was massive, attended by dignitaries and business leaders from across the globe. Do-yool stood in the back, paying respects to a man he'd barely known but who had shaped his life in countless ways. Judith stood at the front with her family, composed despite her grief, and Do-yool's heart ached for her. After the service she found him. Thank you for coming. Of course, Do-yool said. I'm sorry for your loss. He liked you, Judith said unexpectedly. Toward the end. Said you reminded him of himself when he was young and stupid. She smiled through her tears. He meant it as a compliment. I'll take it as one, Do-yool said. They stood together in silence, two people who'd once been married and now were something else entirely. Not friends, not quite. But not enemies either. Maxwell wants you at the family gathering tonight, Judith said. If you're comfortable with that. Are you sure? Your family, Judith said simply. Not in the way you once were, but in a way that matters just as much. You're Maxwell's father. That makes you family. So Do-yool went to the gathering, surrounded by the Nkami clan and Taylor's extensive network, and felt like he belonged somewhere for the first time in years. Not as a husband. Not as the head of anything. Just as Maxwell's dad, and that was enough. His life wasn't perfect. He still struggled with money sometimes, still had moments of regret, still wished he could go back and do things differently from the start. But he couldn't. So instead he moved forward. Kept showing up. Kept trying. Kept being better than he'd been. And slowly, painfully, beautifully that became enough. Years down the line, Do-yool would look back on his story not as a romance that failed but as a lesson that succeeded. He'd learned what truly mattered. He'd learned that love wasn't about grand gestures but consistent presence. That family wasn't about biology but about choice and commitment. He'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is admit you were wrong, work to be better, and accept that some things can't be fixed, only learned from. And in the quiet moments when Maxwell called him just to talk, when his son asked his advice about something, when he was invited to family dinners and celebrations, Do-yool understood that redemption didn't look like he'd once imagined. It looked like this. Small, humble, real. And it was more than he deserved, which made it all the more precious. Life doesn't always work out how you think it will. Sometimes you mess up so badly there's no going back to how things were, but maybe going back isn't the point anyway. Real growth means accepting consequences and building something new from the ruins, even if it's smaller and quieter than what you lost. Anyway, that's where we are now, and honestly I think it's exactly where we're supposed to be. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for even more heartwarming romance stories with unique storyline and twists just like this one. See you in my next one.